The FBI arrested Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan.
Dugan is charged with obstruction of justice. A criminal complaint alleges she used a jury door in her courtroom to help an undocumented immigrant who is facing misdemeanor criminal charges evade ICE agents.
We asked UW legal expert Howard Schwaber whether this is obstruction of justice.
So you really have to separate the law and the politics here. If we accept as true everything the government is saying, and of course the reason we have trials is that we don't accept everything that the government says. But if you assume that everything the government is alleging is true, then yeah, this is a pretty strong case. The judge went way out of her way, not only to not help apprehend this guy, but to guide him out of the courtroom in a way that would avoid the agents without informing the government attorney what she was doing. I would say this looks like a pretty strong case for obstruction. But that's only the pure law side. The politics is much more complicated.
Yeah, and on that note, I wanted to know about the precedent this sets, because there is that basic guarantee where someone can go into a courthouse, seek due process without fear of being arrested on the spot. Right. So what happened here, do you think this will have a ripple effect on other immigrants, witnesses, defendants, who, when they go into the courtroom, would they think twice about it if they know that the executive branch, the Trump administration, for example, is basically waiting for them?
I think there's no question. I should have said law, politics, and policy. So on the policy side, that's exactly the fear. Not only, anyone who whose legal status is unclear, and don't forget that the Trump administration has not only been targeting people who are illegally in America, but people who are here in ways that were legal under the Biden administration, but have now been made illegal. There's a lot of ambiguity. So it will absolutely have a chilling effect on people's willingness to participate in the judicial process. That being said, it does appear from the complaint that there was an attempt to distinguish between the hallways and public areas of the courthouse and the courtrooms themselves, and that's a very traditional distinction. There's always been a norm that the police wouldn't enter into a courtroom, particularly, while it's in session. But there's also always been a norm that it's perfectly okay to perform an arrest in a public area. So in one sense, what ICE is doing is not different from what police authorities have done in the past. But in another sense, it's part of this larger project of sowing fear among the immigrant population. You may recall there used to be a big discussion of self-deportation. Right? We will just make their lives so fearful and uncomfortable they will want to leave. And in that sense, to the extent that that's part of the program or having that effect, it could have very serious effects on the ability of the courts to operate and ripple effects on the degree to which people whose immigration status is at all unclear will be driven underground.
Well, we've talked about the law and we've talked about the policy. Let's talk about the politics. Other than the obvious, why is this so complicated?
Well, so the politics, and having said, as I did, that this is on its face, at least, without knowing more, a strong case of obstruction of justice. It's also the case that it's highly unusual to go around arresting judges. It did happen once in the first Trump term with a judge in Massachusetts. It's even more unusual to do it in this very visible way with handcuffs and photographs in a way that looks very clearly designed to intimidate and embarrass the judge. And that's the political side. So we've seen for months, really literally since the day of inauguration, the Trump administration trying to go after federal judges who rule against their actions, threatening impeachments, threatening to shut down courts, generally speaking in very derogatory and even threatening terms toward those judges. That's a federal separation of powers issue, and that will ultimately land at the U.S. Supreme Court. This, I think, is more about trying to intimidate state officials, not just judges, but state and local officials generally, and make them frightened to resist or fail to cooperate. I don't think it's a coincidence that just this morning, the press secretary announced a new executive order targeting sanctuary cities and state and local officials who participate in sanctuary programs. I think the next phase that we're seeing, so to speak, of the Trump administration's attempt to silence critics is aimed at state government officials, and it's starting with judges. So on the one hand, legally, I think, again, taking the government complaint completely at face value, which at this stage is what we need to do, it's a strong case. Politically, it's very clearly, I think declaration of war is a little strong, but a declaration of hostilities, let's say, towards state and local officials, including judges who are viewed as non-cooperative. And how that will play out, obviously, is critically important. We already have another Wisconsin judge who has said she will effectively go on strike, shut down her courtroom, until the chief judge gives some clear guidance as to when and where ICE agents may operate in courthouses. So this could become a flashpoint at local courthouses around the country, which would be the most interesting thing to watch. Will this be repeated elsewhere?
Yeah, it's quite the case, and we will continue to monitor it.
Professor Schwaber, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.